Welcome to another episode of Extreme Expat Stories of Thailand. I hope this email finds you well, though I doubt anything is well anymore. I don't know who you are or whether you'll ever read this, but I need to tell someone. I was scrolling through your channel, watching all those wild stories about expats in Thailand, and I thought, maybe someone like you needs to hear mine. I'm sitting here with my hands shaking so badly I can barely type. Something absolutely horrific happened to me here. Something I can barely stand to think about. Writing it down feels like the only way to keep myself from completely losing my mind. I have nobody else to tell this to, so I'm telling you. My name is Ivan. I'm 34 years old, and I come from Eastern Europe. I moved to Thailand a little over a year ago. Back home, life had become suffocating in ways I can't fully explain. I grew up in a cold, grey city filled with endless apartment blocks and snow-covered streets. I worked long hours as an accountant, earning decent money, but every single day felt like a carbon copy of the one before. I never married or had kids. I guess I was always running away from something, maybe just the monotony of existence itself. I'd spend nights wide awake, watching my breath fog up the window as I stared out at endless rain or snow, longing desperately to break free from that prison of mediocrity. But there was one thing that kept me sane during those dark years: motorcycles. I was obsessed with them since I was a boy. My grandfather taught me to ride on his old Yamaha when I was just 5 years old, and I could never forget that feeling of flying through the wind, completely free. I remember sneaking out at night on a beat-up bicycle I'd rigged to look like a motorbike, pretending it had a roar. By the time I was a teenager, I was stripping engines out of discarded bikes and rebuilding them in our backyard. There was something about the raw power of a motorcycle, the pure freedom it represented, that no boring office job ever could. Fixing that old Yamaha felt like fixing my own broken spirit. The thrill of speed, the wind on my face, that was the only time I felt truly alive. So I saved money obsessively for years. I had a small, sad apartment with peeling wallpaper, and I dumped as much cash into my little bike fund as I could. When I finally took the plunge and booked that one-way ticket halfway around the world, my heart felt like it would burst right out on my chest. That night at the airport, I was a mixture of fear and pure ecstasy. I was leaving everything I knew behind, but I felt exhilarated. I kept reminding myself that I was brave, that I was going to have the adventure I'd always dreamed of. I ended up in Bangkok, and it was more chaotic than I could have ever imagined. The traffic was insanity incarnate. Buses, tuk-tuks, cars, and motorcycles all merging together in one constant blaring swarm. Drivers roared around each other at impossible speeds, honking with manic smiles on their faces. High-rise buildings lit in neon towered above everything, and every alley seemed like its own separate world. The air was thick with the smell of diesel, grilled meat, and incense. Back home, the city was gray and depressing. Here, every single day felt like a festival of colors and chaos and energy. The constant motion filled me with equal parts fear and excitement. Almost as soon as I arrived, I knew I had to ride. I needed that freedom right away. I saved the last bit of money I had and found a used motorcycle dealer. The old Thai man behind the desk chuckled when I told him I wanted speed. "You'll get used to it," he said with a knowing wink. I didn't argue or bargain. I wanted the fastest bike he had. He took me to the back of his shop and handed me the keys to a battered 150cc Yamaha that was probably twice my age. When I kicked the bike into life, its engine roared like an old lion. The vibration thrilled me in ways I can't describe. I paid him without hesitation and jumped on, tearing out of that alleyway faster than I've ever moved in my life. My days here quickly became a blur of fuel and adrenaline. I rode all over the city, through blinding monsoon rains that turned the streets into mirrors, through thick dusty sunsets, and into neon-drenched nights. I learned every shortcut and hidden back road in Bangkok. Traffic lights might as well have been suggestions to me. One night, after a long shift of running legitimate deliveries on my bike, I let my frustrations out on the throttle. I rode through the neon glow of the city center, past temple steps with priests leaving for the night, through narrow markets where street vendors were packing up exotic fruits. I pushed the bike harder than I ever had, weaving in and out of cars like they were standing still. The city was chaos, but that chaos called to me. The faster I went, the more alive I felt. But reality caught up with me eventually, as it always does. When my money ran out, my debt piles grew quickly. The jobs here didn't pay how I expected, and I was too cocky to slow down and be patient. I tried finding normal work. I taught English part-time, but my accent was horrible and students giggled when I mispronounced words. I tried bartending, but people called me Bar because of my accent. I cleaned hotel rooms at dawn for what amounted to nothing. Still not enough. Some nights, losing track of time, I went out drinking and gambling, trying to push my luck. Eventually, I had absolutely nothing left. Then a friend of a friend offered me an easy way to make cash. I met a guy named Vichai one night at a motorcycle meetup. He was smooth and dangerous looking, dressed in black leather with a faint scar across his eyebrow. At first, I thought he sold racing parts or something like that. But over 2 beers, he explained a gig. Look, you want money quick? Meet this local. He needs packages delivered around the city. No questions asked. Lives outside the law, but he pays well. No paperwork, nothing official. Just go, pick up, drop off, cash when you finish. I hesitated even as my wallet seemed to open by itself. It was too perfect, and I knew it. But I needed the money so desperately. The first time I met Vichai in person, it was behind an old repair shop near Sukhumvit, the kind of place where the smell of oil and smoke never fades. He leaned against his bike like it was a throne, cigarette glowing in the rain. His friends stood around him, silent, watchful men with tattoos of serpents coiled around their necks. The moment I arrived, I felt out of place. Vichai's grin was calm, but his eyes were sharp and amused, like he'd already measured me and found my weaknesses. He told me stories about riders who vanished after one bad delivery, laughing as if it were a joke. I laughed too, trying to hide the chill crawling up my spine. My hands shook when I took the first envelope from him, so he pressed it against my chest and said, "Don't open. Don't ask. You'll sleep better." I told myself it was harmless. Documents, money, something small. I promised myself it would be just one night. But one night became another, and then another. That very night, just before midnight, I rode to a decrepit building in Chinatown. A small, wiry man with a shaved head and tattoos on his neck handed me a nondescript black bag. "To Ban Pra, quick," he said. I threw the bag on my back, nodded, and took off. The moment I did, I felt like a criminal, but also absolutely free. I peeled away through the traffic until the city lights were behind me. When I arrived at the drop-off point, an old warehouse, I handed over the bag. Inside were bottles of some expensive alcohol for a local VIP, I guess. They paid me 5,000 baht cash, right there. I stood under a flickering neon light, counting the bills with shaky hands. It was more in one night than I'd make working days legally. I felt the thrill. I was lucky. From then on, I became an illicit courier. Every night I was racing ghosts. I'd pick up packages from dingy alleys or outside 7-Elevens from silent men in helmets, then speed off into the dark on my motorcycle. Sometimes the packages were just envelopes or small boxes. Other times they were heavy parcels that cut deep into my shoulders. I never opened them. Maybe I should have out of curiosity, but fear kept me from prying. Fear of what? Even now I'm not sure. Maybe fear of who was waiting for it, or fear of where it could lead me. I try not to think about it too hard. The money became intoxicating. I wore thick stacks of cash like armor in my pockets. On the bike, I felt untouchable. There were nights I raced across town in an hour, outrunning any suspicion that might follow. I pushed the bike to its limits, through deserted streets, under the full moon, the engine howling below me. One night, after delivering a very heavy package at 2 in the morning, I found myself on an empty highway outside the city limits, with nothing but the moon and neon reflecting on the wet road. I twisted the throttle. The speedometer climbed faster than I expected. I had a moment of pure adrenaline where I felt weightless on the bike. The wind screamed and my heart was pumping so hard that I think I nearly flew off the seat. In that moment, I felt like an unstoppable force, like nothing could ever harm me. Then, one rainy Thursday night, I met her. It sounds like something out of a movie. I was at a street bar in a red-lit district, standing under an awning while I finished the last of my Chang beer. Rain was pouring, soaking the street like it wanted to wash it clean. I saw her across the street facing a temple shrine. She had long, dark hair, wet from the downpour, and she looked oddly alone amid all the chaos. Something about her drew me in immediately. Despite the storm, there was a gentle power in the way she stood. I approached and dropped onto the bar stool next to her. I remember rambling out the first thing in my mind, something about the rain and how it sounded like thunder from a drum. And she turned to look at me. Her eyes were huge and dark, serious and playful at the same time. I think I said, "Rain seems to follow me around." She laughed softly at my terrible Thai accent. That laugh felt like sunshine cutting through clouds, like something breaking open inside my chest. Her name was Dao, which means star. She was in her late 20s, and she told me she worked as a dancer at a nearby club, though the way she said it made me worried it wasn't entirely by choice. I asked her about her dreams and her eyes got distant, like she was seeing something far away. A scar on her knuckle caught my eye. It looked like the kind people get from fighting or hard work. She brushed it off and changed the subject to ask about why a foreigner was here at this hour. I stumbled out some story about freedom and fast bikes, and she smiled like she understood something deeper than my words. We talked until the bar closed. The music stopped and the people dispersed, but we stayed under the awning, dripping wet, the neon lights flickering around us. I offered to give her a ride home on my bike. She hesitated for only a second, and then climbed on behind me, laughing when I hesitated to start the engine too quickly. The cold rain hit our faces as we sped off. She hugged me tight. I held on to the throttle with one hand and reached back with the other to steady her leg. As we wove through the glistening streets, I felt my heart pounding from more than speed. I could feel her breath on my back and smell the wet jasmine from her hair. In that crazy city moment, I realized I was falling for her. We stopped at a viewpoint by the river by mistake. I had no map in the storm and spent 15 minutes just talking quietly under the umbrellas of the overpass. She held my helmet for me when I took it off, and for once I didn't want to be anywhere else. Over the next 4 days, Dao and I were inseparable. We rented a tiny apartment with a single room. It had a view of a narrow alley full of green vines and the sound of chanting monks in the distance. Each evening, we'd go out into the storm or wander the quiet streets, talking about everything. She had a quick wit that always made me laugh. She taught me a few Thai phrases, giggling uncontrollably at my horrible accent. I taught her a few words in my language, making up the pronunciations just to hear her laugh again. She loved small, beautiful things: paper cranes, the sound of temple bells, the way the sunlight hit puddles after rain. One afternoon, we sat at a tiny cafe tucked behind a market, and she folded a napkin in the shape of a bird. "It means luck," she said, and slipped it into my pocket. I still have it. At night, she'd light a single incense stick by the window and close her eyes while murmuring a prayer. I asked what she prayed for, and she said softly, "For peace, for you to slow down." I laughed, thinking she meant it as a joke. She didn't. Sometimes she'd trace the scar on her knuckle with her thumb and whisper, "Everything leaves a mark." I didn't ask what she meant. We rode out once toward the river at dusk. The air smelled of lemongrass and wet asphalt. She rode behind me, her arms loose around my waist, humming a Thai song I didn't know. When we stopped, she pointed at the water and said, "Even the river wants to escape." I told her I understood that feeling too well. She smiled sadly and said, "Then maybe you're both running from the same thing." I think I fell in love with her at that moment. Every morning, Dao would make us a simple breakfast of rice congee with an egg. She licked red curry and rice off my fingers and told me I was ruining a perfectly good breakfast. We danced a little to the sound of a game show on the TV. All those ordinary moments felt extraordinary because of her. I had never felt this way before, like I belonged somewhere, like I had finally found what I was searching for all those years. I remember the last night before the accident vividly. It had stopped raining and the city was humid and warm. We lay in each other's arms all night, talking and laughing until sunrise. She called me Kun Ivan, mixing Thai with my name, and it made me feel like I actually belonged to this place. She kissed the crease of my neck and said, "Stay with me." I wanted to promise I would, but I couldn't. I was still tangled up in that other life. The next morning, though, my phone buzzed with a reminder. Another package to deliver. I almost ignored it. I held Dao's face and said, "One more, then I'm all yours. I promise." She kissed my hand softly and nodded. We were under the open window of the apartment, the rising sun streaming in. Raindrops still lingered on the window sill. She was wearing a yellow sundress that looked like captured sunlight. I studied her in that moment, trying to memorize every feature: the curve of her cheek, the freckles by her eyes, the way she gently rubbed the sleep out of her eyes. I told myself I would remember this forever. Then I was gone. The storm was back that morning, violent and angry. I wrapped my gloves and strapped on a second helmet for Dao. I begged her to come with me, but she refused at the last second and told me to be safe. I told her I would, and I meant it in the moment. She gave me a tight hug and whispered, "Come back soon." Then I put my own helmet on and turned the key. The engine roared, drowning out her voice that said, "Be careful." I was already late for the delivery. My phone navigated me through the flood of traffic. The roads had become dark rivers with murky puddles hiding potholes. I cursed at myself as I realized how far I had to go. Panic crept in. I didn't want to disappoint the guy who paid me. Every traffic light ahead turned red as I approached. I could swear they taunted me. My heartbeat quickened and my vision tunneled. I started to speed. Every stop sign I just flew through. My eyes darted, looking for anything that could go wrong. I passed cars that honked angrily at me. I heard a horn blare as I jumped a curb. I could feel the tires lose grip for a moment before catching again. The rain was pounding on my visor so hard it was like needle stabs. I kept telling myself, "Just one more minute and you'll be back." But I forgot Dao's face, I think, in that moment of panic. Out of nowhere, in the corner of my eye, I saw someone step off the curb in the street. It was too late for me to stop. It happened in an instant. There was a splash and a flash of neon. I saw her, Dao, standing on the street, just a few feet in front of me. Her face was pale even in the rain, and her eyes were wide with shock. I swerved hard on the slick road, but I still hit her. I felt her body impact the bike. I remember hearing the metal scrape as she flew up and then thud into the asphalt. My whole body jolted. Time slowed. The rain seemed quieter, my engine silent. She tumbled through a puddle and then lay still. No, 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 I whispered. I remember stumbling off the bike. My helmet came off and hit the ground with a crack. I was screaming inside but making no sound. I ran toward her, but instinct kicked in. I felt the back of my head saying, "Run," and the front of me screaming, "Stop." I looked down at her on the pavement. A stream of bright red blood mixed with the monsoon water around her head. Her eyes were closed. The piece of her sundress that had been under my helmet was torn and dirty. For a second, the world went silent. The only sound was the rain hitting the asphalt like static. I dropped to my knees beside her, my fingers trembling as I tried to lift her head. Her eyes fluttered, just barely, and a faint breath escaped her lips. Maybe my name, maybe only air. A thin stream of blood ran toward the gutter, swirling with the rainwater. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once and then went quiet. I pressed my shaking hand to her chest, waiting for movement, a heartbeat, anything. But all I felt was the warmth slipping away. My own reflection in a puddle stared back at me, distorted and unrecognizable. And then my cowardice took over. I got on my bike again and sped away without looking back. I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I live with it. The rest is a nightmare. I don't know how I got here. I don't know how far I drove or how I avoided traffic. I was just a shell staring at the wet road ahead. Finally, I ended up in an alley a few streets away and stopped. I sat on the curb in the pitch dark, heart hammering. My whole body was shaking. I ripped my helmet off and shuddered. The city felt miles away. It was just me, the empty alley, and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I kept saying her name into the darkness, but only the drain pipes answered. I slammed my fist against the wall. I couldn't stop. The memory of her flying, the sound of the crash, and then nothing, just nothing, kept repeating in my head. I found myself leaning forward, hands on knees, sobbing silently as the rain finally began to ease off. I didn't think about the package or the bag on my back. I only thought of her face. I don't even know how I got back here. I must have changed jackets and cleaned up a bit, because when I woke up on this thin mattress, I was in clean clothes. But my soul hasn't cleaned one bit. I haven't eaten. I haven't slept. I barely blink. I don't even turn on lights anymore. Everything around me is dark, like the hours after that accident. They must be searching for me by now. Whenever a police siren wails in the distance, I jump. A friend back at the office texted me just to check in. I know he's going to be mad that I didn't answer, but I put my phone on silent and leave it face down on the mattress. I was the last person with her. She had just been a bright, beautiful star in the rain, and now she's gone. And I'm the one who caused it. I'm the one who made the selfish choice to leave her, and I'm the one who couldn't slow down. I still remember the sound of her laugh, like silver bells echoing over the temple walls. I remember the warmth of her hand on my back when we rode through storms. Those memories feel like they would belong to someone else, like I'm watching a dream that was too good to be true. Every time I see a motorcycle now, I flinch. I imagine her right behind me, and I think, if only we hadn't parted. Every time the rain starts, I break all over again. Tao taught me to love rain. She said it cleansed the world and washed away the old. But now it only reminds me of that day. I've started talking to myself in the mirror, telling myself things I should have done differently. Phrases like, "Why did you go? Why didn't you slow down? What's wrong with you?" Until my own words echo back at me and I see nothing behind my eyes but guilt and tears. I think I'm going insane. The only peace I feel is when the city is empty at 4 in the morning and I lean against my apartment door, listening to the distant hum of traffic, imagining it's Dao's voice calling me, whispering, "Ivan, I'm sorry, but it's just the thunder far away." If anyone reads this, let it be clear. I am not a good person. I was a fool in love, and now I am a ruined one. The city that once made me feel alive is an open grave to me. Love can die in an instant, in the blink of an eye. I thought speed and freedom were my friends. I was wrong. Speed was my addiction, and freedom was an illusion. I hope that by telling my story, maybe someone out there will think twice before making the same mistakes I did. If you have someone you care about, hug them. Don't leave without looking back at least once. One split second of recklessness, and everything can be lost forever. I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life. I will dream of her falling, waking up to find it's still real. Every night I whisper her name to the darkness and into my pillow so it will be the last thing I hear before sleep finally takes me. I have nowhere else to write this. This email is the only confession I have. I do not expect you or to do anything for me. I just needed someone, anyone, to know what happened, to hold this story and understand how quickly love and life can be destroyed by a single moment of carelessness. I am so sorry. I don't deserve forgiveness. I only pray that I have told the truth here, that someone can understand. Sincerely, Ivan.